Welcome to hashtag 52 Needs, and this week we are talking about kindness. And I am so delighted to have with me Dr. Eliza Howard, PhD, who is the owner and ideas woman of Flish Consulting. Eliza is an independent facilitator, speaker, academic researcher, and writer with over 20 years of experience in the higher education, media, and corporate sectors. She helps clients develop strategy, culture, and policy using facilitation methodology. Hello, Eliza. Lovely.
Hello, Angela. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for making yourself available, because I know kindness is important for both of us.
Very important. Yes, absolutely. We've talked about this before. It's sort of an essential part of life. It's I think how the best way to run life, and I value it, I think, above all other things, because I think so many things lead from it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, I in preparation for this, I had a little look, because I went, what's the definition of kindness? I always like to look at what people say. And it says, okay, there's two kinds. There's kindness to others is a helpful act. But what is kindness to self?
Yes, that's true. I think it encompasses several different areas. I think, acting kind towards yourself is really, really important, but that sort of encompasses both physical and literal needs, but also metaphorical and emotional needs too. And you've got to really be careful to be kind to yourself. We all slip into a place sometimes where we're not so kind to ourselves, and sometimes we can be our own worst critics. And I think that you really have to work on that, because it's very difficult to be kind to other people if you're not truly kind to yourself. And definitely for me, I have moments where I am not kind to myself at all, and I'm heavily self-critical. But especially, as you know, Angela, I've got 3 boys. I'm raising 3 sons, and I want them to grow up to be kind more than anything else, because I think so much flows from that. Kindness towards others means that you're a great team member, you're a great partner, you're a great member of society, and I can't teach them how to be like that if I don't show them being kind to, being kind to myself. So I think it's really, really important to set that example.
Absolutely. I think where it starts for me is with the self-talk. Because I have to remind myself, would I say these things to my best friend, to a child, to, anybody? And we're very good with, being kind to other people, but then we dump on ourselves. But what we do is, and again, I think that's changing. And I know that you're a very conscious parent, but what we used to do is we used to run all the things that we heard our parents say, I have literally seen and much rarer these days, but parents say to a child, "Oh, you're so stupid, stop doing that." And that's the kind of stuff that we keep reiterating in our heads after a while. We just have that tape running, and that's then the generational trance. We pass it on to the next generation. And thankfully, I think we're breaking that.
I hope so. I certainly hope so for my sons. But yes, fingers crossed. But I think it's really important as well to sort of be able to differentiate between making a mistake and being unkind to yourself. We make mistakes to learn and grow, and it's important to acknowledge those mistakes and say, but acknowledge them in a kind way. If it wasn't intentional, and this is one of the things that I'm really trying to do, I guess, in my own life, and especially with my sons, is to say, if you make a mistake and it's accidental, then or even if it's deliberate, because children being children, they do things deliberately, you've got to make it up to people. And I think that there was a book written by a wonderful man called Randy Pausch many years ago. The name's totally slipped my mind, but he was a professor in the States who was he was suffering from pancreatic cancer at the time, and he wrote this wonderful book about kindness and life and things before he passed away. And one of the things was learning how to apologize to people. And he said there's 3 steps to an apology. The first step is saying sorry. The second step is saying it won't happen again, and the third step is saying, how can I make this right? And that how can I make this right shows a kindness towards the other person and a kindness towards yourself. So I think it's also important to learn to to be kind to yourself and teach your children to be kind to other people when you have made mistakes, and to really go that extra mile to make sure that you're making things right. But also knowing that, making errors and being kind to other people, it's all part of the learning process and becoming a better person, because we're not just sort of, we're all human beings. We're all going to make mistakes. There are always going to be moments where we slip up and we're not as kind as we could be. And so it's important to teach ourselves and to teach others how to rectify that, I think, as well.
Absolutely. Because I think it's kindness that makes us human, right? I mean, I remember the Dalai Lama used to say, what was it? My religion is very simple. Kindness is my religion. And
yes.
And again, I'm not a religious person, but I like that, that it's a philosophy. I mean, Buddhism is a philosophy more than anything else, but it makes us human. Kindness makes us human. And it's different to compassion, I think. Compassion is more, it's more alleviating somebody's suffering, whereas kindness is just, and this is the thing, when I looked up the definitions, it's saying kindness, the act of being kind. I'm like, okay, that's great. Can we just have something that describes it more? And it was like, again, it's a helpful act.
I think so. I think compassion, to me anyway, and I don't know the dictionary definition of compassion, but compassion to me is a more passive act, and kindness is an active, where you're actually going out into the world and showing it. Being compassionate is very important, because, I think learning to show compassion and build empathy towards others definitely leads to kindness, because it's wanting to understand, how people are, what has led to that. And, I'm often in parenting where we're told these days that, for example, look for the purpose behind the behavior, like why is this behavior occurring? So trying to be compassionate towards other people and potentially understanding why they're acting a certain way can lead definitely to you being more kind towards people, and that act, showing through.
Yeah. I mean, when kindness is a bridge, right? I mean, it helps us understand somebody better. It helps us understand somebody who has, again, a different religion, a different belief system, a different way of looking at a situation. It allows us to step outside of that, I'm right, you're wrong. It helps us be, again, more compassionate. Compassion for me is always associated with, I'm helping you alleviate your suffering. It's more about connecting. It's more about finding a way in which we can be on the same page, even though we may have come from, we have different ways of looking at the world. We can totally disagree with some things, but connection is what connects us. Kindness is what connects us.
Absolutely. And I think that the kinder we become, the more we see the shades of grey as well in the world. We're not just very black and white about, okay, I'm right, you're wrong. It's very much like, well, we have things to learn from each other. Which I think is the most important. I think for sure. I think as well, kindness is something that is seen as a really, often seen as a really passive kind of skill. But if we make it into something active, it can be extremely powerful. And especially we've talked about being kind towards others and kind towards ourselves, but kindness towards others is also kind towards yourself. Study after study shows, medical studies, multitudes of them show that being kind to other people really improves your own self-worth and your own emotional stability and your own mental health as well. So, that kindness towards others is also doing something really significant for you internally and externally as well. So I think that's important not to overlook.
Well, this is probably a good place for me to talk about, because I really wanted to get that in. My friend Scott has a project, he and Shorty. So Scotty and Shorty have a project called The Business of Smiles. And what they do is they hand out yellow socks with black dots to people in the street. And they go, and I've done this, I've gone out with them. And it is, here's a pair of socks for you. It's free. There's no expectation. I just want to acknowledge you for doing the best you can right now, because these are difficult times. And people brighten up. and they start talking about the mental health issues they have, the, you know, whatever other challenges they come. And it's sometimes the conversation keeps going. And it's the most fulfilling sense of being to stand with a person who opens up simply because they have received a pair of socks.
Oh, isn't it lovely?
Yeah.
Isn't it beautiful? And especially when people realize, no, this is a genuine attempt to connect. It's not, you know, no one's trying to sell us anything, trying to get anything out of us. Yeah. It's just a genuine attempt for people to connect with each other and be kind. It's kind of like reminds me of the guy who many years ago started the free hugs movement and just stood in with a sign in the middle of a city and just said, you know, free hugs, and people would come up and hug him, and there was, you know, no strings attached at all. And obviously that was pre-pandemic days when people still felt comfortable hugging strangers. But even the guy in New York who has those funny protest signs, I don't know if you've seen him, but there's a guy who just holds up really funny protest signs in random places in New York. Things like the bottom right-hand burner on your stove is the best burner, and things like that, which are just completely irrelevant. But bring a smile to people's faces and, you know, show connection over the most ridiculous things. Like those simple acts of just being in public and giving people a smile are so underrated. People see it as sort of a gimmick, maybe. But, you know, what's harmful in a gimmick that just makes people smile? There's absolutely nothing harmful. And especially if it gets those conversations about mental health and, you know, connection between people in society, especially if, you know, it's getting those conversations going. I think it's super, super important. And so I love that Yellow Sock Project. That's a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah. The thing is, a lot of people don't immediately react to the socks with a sense of, oh, thank you. They go, what's the catch? Because we have learned that kindness always is not always, it's mostly a boomerang. So I'm kind to you, so I get something back. When somebody just does it from a selfless place, people often get confused. Because I think
that's true.
We've become quite cynical. And there's often, I mean, like, I get invited to all these webinars and, you know, like meetings and all of those all the time. And I know at the end of it is a pitch. Yes. Right? There's nothing for free. It's like, I've had your time, I've had your attention. Now you have to buy my product.
Yes, I've noticed that on LinkedIn a lot too, where people will try and connect with you, coaches and things like that. And I had this one woman try to connect with me, and she was saying, yes, but what do you do? And what is it that you really want out of this? And da 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 da. And I said to her, look, you know, I appreciate your interest, but look, honestly, I don't have any time or money to spend on you right now. And I'm grateful, but kind of implying very politely that I knew where this was going. No more contact, no more connection. And, you know, that's really, really sad. I think that people in society should occasionally feel free to, you know, offer kindness. And kindness, I think true kindness, you're not expecting anything in return. But I want people in society to look at me as the type of person that they can ask for kindness from, and they will, you know, and I'll do it because it's good for everybody. Even I'm just thinking about an incident that I had in the supermarket over the weekend where I had a trolley full of groceries, you know, growing boys and all of that. And I had, and I realized I left all of my recyclable bags in the car. And so I was at the checkout queue was very long, and I said to the woman in front of me, you know, look, I'm sorry to have to ask this, but would you mind just watching this while I ran to the car and got my bags? And she just looked at me and went, no problem, that's so easy. You know, that made my life so much easier. But after that, like you were saying with the yellow socks, that opened up a conversation. She's, you know, she's like, full trolley today. I said, yes, you know, I've got 3 boys. Oh, I've got 3 boys too, but they're now older. So, you know, I've got twins who are 7 and then a 2-year-old, but her boys were in their early 20s. And so we got to talking about raising boys and, you know, in this long checkout queue. And it was just such a beautiful example of, you know, I had to ask for kindness from someone, not being able to give anything back in return. But what it turned out, we both got something out of the interaction. You know, we sort of made a friend that we'll wave to at the supermarket and in the future and see around the suburb, which is lovely. And I think that, you know, having that bounce back is so underrated as well. You know, just the pictures, you know, the pictures are so obvious, but when you get that sort of relationship development, and just each time something like that happens, you just understand people a little bit more, and you just see them, for their own struggles and their own joys and everything in between. It's absolutely lovely.
I mean, one of the reasons why I love living in Brisbane, it's because it's a big city, but it's still a country town on some level. Because I can walk down the street and I can say hello to people. I can say hi, and I know the people in my neighborhood. Whereas when I lived in the big cities, and I've lived in, New York, Hong Kong, and really big cities, where people just basically don't look at each other. They just walk past each other. And when you say hello to somebody, and you, even if no expectation other than hello, there's this something wrong.
Yes, yes, I agree. I remember when I lived in Washington, D.C., and I lived about halfway between the Capitol building and the old baseball stadium. And this is when it was still a baseball stadium all those years ago. And but between where I lived and the baseball stadium, when it wasn't a baseball match, it was actually quite a rundown type area. And there were a lot of drug dealers and things like that in that area. And I remember my mum, who's one of the most friendly people on the planet, who likes to say hello to everybody. That's just how she is, she's just a person that everyone gets along with. But she came to visit me, and I took her to a baseball match, and she was saying hello to all of the young men who were usually the drug dealers on the steps, saying, hello, how are you? Hello, how are you? And they were kind of looking at her going, what is this? She doesn't want any drugs from us or anything like that. But she was, saying hello. And it's like, you probably shouldn't do that in this area. But she's so conditioned towards that openness and kindness. It was actually a really sweet, kind of innocent experience. So, and to see the reaction of the young men, they were kind of really almost impressed by it. They weren't used to that kindness and that lack of expecting anything back in return. It was just a really amusing experience to see.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I was just thinking as you were talking about this, that I used to fly a lot. Now most of my work is online, which is good for the environment. I would get on a plane and I would say hello to the person sitting next to me. And there was no expectation of starting a conversation, just we're going to be sitting next to each other for a few hours, or, even if it's just an hour and a half, I could say hello. I mean, we're sharing real close space. And people would literally go, hello, and look away very quickly, because it was like, oh, I hope she's not going to start a conversation with me. I really don't want to talk. And this is, again, that I've got emotions, needs, and boundaries. Like, again, when you define your needs for kindness, you can also set boundaries. It's perfectly okay to say, I'm happy to say hello, and say, you know what, I really, like if the person starts engaging in a conversation, being kind to yourself and saying, look, I'd really like to read my book right now. Really appreciate you wanting to have a conversation, not in the space right now. I don't see anything wrong with that when it comes from a place of kindness as well.
Well, it's kind to yourself and kind to the other person, because instead of just ignoring them and reading your book, you're making clear as to what your own expectations are. And that should be a normal part of the discourse. I think it's unkind to both yourself and the other person to not do that. I mean, and there are ways of doing it. You don't have to say go away and be unkind and push back. You can say, look, I really want to listen to my podcast, or I've had a terrible night's sleep. I'd like to just try and, relax for this little time on the plane. So, there are different ways to go about it. There's always a kind way and an unkind way, but there's, it's free to choose kind, so choose kind.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that I think is so important to teach children. When children, because children, and as you know, I don't have children, so I'm talking about, having had lots of children around me. But when you're really clear with children in a kind way and saying, look, I've got something to do here right now. I'm available to you. I'm available to play with you in 15 minutes if they're old enough to follow, to see the clock. But I'll be there very, very shortly. And then honoring that and not going, I'm going to be so busy now. No, sorry, I missed that. Something has come up. But when we're really kind to children and we're saying to them, I'm managing expectations here, but I'm honoring also the promise that I have made. Children recognize that. And my experience is they also become kind. They stop being needy. They don't start pushing and going, They get into that place of, okay, acceptance, as long as they know that I will honor my promise.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you build trust that way too. But it's often what, parenting experts and child psychologists say to parents as well. We're told very often, invest the time in your child and say, look, I have 10 minutes to play with you, but then I need half an hour to cook dinner. You play hard for 10 minutes and you give them everything. And then you say, okay, you give them warnings. You say, we've got 1 minute to go, or then, okay, time's up. Mummy needs to cook dinner, or daddy needs to help mummy with something or do something else. When you do that, the children are often far less needy. They've had their expectations met. You've given them everything. You've told them why you need to go, whether it be for work or whether it be to do some household chore or something like that. And they know what to expect. But also, more valuably, you're teaching them to set boundaries with you as well. And even my 2-year-old will say to me, if I'm giving him too many kisses or too many raspberries or whatever, he will just go, and I'll say, okay. And I respect that boundary because he's learning how to set boundaries.
Yes.
And he's very happy once he knows, he sort of says no, and that you will respect that boundary. It's much, he's much better off. I'm much better off. And he's learning healthy, setting healthy limits.
Exactly. And that's going to help him so much when he grows up. And there will be bullies, because they are always bullies.
Absolutely.
And to set the boundaries from a place of kindness and clearness, because we all know that bullies are not really strong.
No, that's right.
And when you come from a place of strong kindness, they mostly back off.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, how to deal with the people who don't, that's a totally different story. The point I want to make is that when we set an example for children and we teach them how to have boundaries with kindness, they learn. Yes. And who knows, we may stop them from being bullies in the first place.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think Alexander McCall Smith, who's one of my most favourite authors, who wrote the #1 Ladies Detective Agency series and so many other great books. But in one of his books, he said, I think it's a book called Lars Orchestra Saves the World. He had a quote that there is nothing in the world that can't be solved with kindness. And I really try to live by that. And I think that's so true in many situations, whether you'll be dealing with a bully or whether you're just helping someone out in the supermarket with a shopping trolley. So many situations can just be solved using kindness.
I totally agree. And this is a wonderful place to stop. Thank you so much, Eliza.
You're so welcome.
In our other conversation about kindness at work. And thank you, everybody, for watching and for listening. And we'll see you next time.